Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan Lawless with Bilt Rewards. I've spent 20 years working in housing, and today I'm going to look at housing advice from TikTok. Let me start with this first one.
So I might be able to buy a $400,000 house with no money out of my pocket. I'm going to take advantage of a first-time home buyer program. I can use an FHA loan that only allows me to put 3.5% down, but I need to live in the property. I'm going to now use a down payment assistance program, and they will cover my entire down payment, so I don't have to pay the 3.5%. Now all I have to worry about is closing costs. I'm going to ask the seller to pay some of my closing costs. I'm going to offer a little bit higher than the home price, and the difference the seller will take and use that to pay off my part of my closing costs.
Well, this guy's impressive. It's pretty awesome to be able to buy a house without any money. He's actually onto something here, and let me talk about a couple of things that he mentions. The first thing he said is a low down payment program. Those definitely exist. The thing that's a little tricky about these programs is that, as some of you remember applying for scholarships to college, they're really complicated to find the one that fits exactly who you are. And so down payment assistance programs are like that. You can go to a website, there's one called downpaymentresources.com, where you can put in some information. It'll tell you if there are programs out there that you qualify for. But I just wouldn't get your hopes up. The restrictions get really complicated, and so you might not always be able to find a program. The next thing he mentions is another thing that you have to pay for when you buy a home, which is all the closing costs. And he optimistically says that his seller is going to pay for his closing costs, which would be really awesome if sellers did that. But in a market like today, where sellers basically are dominating, they can do whatever they want. You don't get to ask them to pay for stuff for you. They basically will say no. But if you're lucky enough to get a down payment assistance program and find a desperate seller, then you may be able to buy a home with nothing down. But I just wouldn't get too excited about it. All right, let's watch another one here.
Don't buy this. Buy this. You don't want to buy the nicest house in the neighborhood. You want to buy the ugly house in the neighborhood. And here's why. You want to buy the ugly house in the area. So when you actually rehab it, when it's all done, it's worth the same, but the house is already nice. So here's an example. You can buy a home like this for $800,000 in the neighborhood. But you can buy this for about $400,000. You can put $200,000 in rehab. By the time you're all done, you end up with $600,000. Now this house is worth the same as this. There's $200,000 equity in it. We call that sweat equity. It was always better to buy the ugly house than the nice house.
This is an interesting topic. The idea of buying a fixer-upper is kind of the better approach is not always true. And the reason I say that is, well, first of all, this guy bought a house for $400,000, then just had $200,000 of money to put into rehab. That's an awful lot of money to have sitting around to be able to rehab a home. But the other thing that he's really optimistic about is that he can do a rehab that's that good. Anybody who's tried to do a renovation, anything, knows that it always goes wrong, always takes longer, is always more expensive than you think. And if you're just an amateur out there trying to fix up your own home, you're just gonna screw up. And I've seen that time and time again. There's a lot of professionals out there that do this. They really know what they're doing. They know how to do rehabs. They've got construction companies that work for them, and they're the ones that buy up these fixer-uppers, and they can make money like that. But the average person who's trying to buy a home like that, it's really, really hard. And oftentimes it just goes south. I do like the idea of renovating a home when you buy it. There are actually mortgages you can get where you can buy the home and finance the cost of fixing up the home. FHA has a program called 203K. Fannie Mae has a program called Home Style Renovation, which is awesome because if you want to do simple things like upgrade the floors, a lot of times you can just finance the cost of doing that and take a decent house and make it great. Don't buy the ugly house. Okay, let's take a look at another one here.
Bing, bang, bing, bang, bing, bang, bing, bang.
This one is spot on. It's something that we see happen a lot in the mortgage business where somebody applies for a mortgage, they've got X amount of savings and they got decent credit, and then as soon as they know they're buying a house, they go out and buy all of the nicest furniture in the world, and they're like, I feel so excited, I'm gonna buy a car, and then they're like, oh, I might want to change my job. And every time that happens, by the time you get to closing, you're no longer eligible for the same mortgage you were initially, and it's a complete and utter disaster. So don't do anything that's gonna make what you use to qualify change significantly from the time that you apply, usually 45 days till you close. Okay guys, let's watch another one.
Nobody is paying attention to this key difference between 2008 and today's housing market. That difference is that monthly mortgage rates in 2008 were outpacing rent payments. In today's market, rents are rising and monthly mortgage payments and values are rising. That right there proves this is a supply and demand issue.
Oh, that's an interesting observation about the market. I mean, we kind of look at the market in 2008, and you had a big bubble. Suddenly everyone was defaulting on their loans, and a bunch of houses flooded the market. Actually, rents didn't do too bad because people were losing their homes, but they had to live somewhere, so rents kind of stayed pretty good. But his observation on today's market is exactly right. We've seen in the last, call it really ever since 2008, that the number of homes being built is not nearly as many as people needing homes. I mean, for some of you who live in places like Austin or San Francisco or Washington, D.C., you see this every day. Like the second a home goes on the market, 5 people have already snuck in a bid before you even get to the open house. That's clearly an issue of a supply and demand issue. So, I do expect that to change at some point as we keep building more homes. But this economist seems to be saying, I think is right on. Okay, let's watch this next one here.
Hey Dad, is renting just a big waste of money? Not necessarily, it depends. See, I thought renting was just throwing money away. Think about it this way. When you're renting, you can move anytime you want. Your landlord pays for all of the maintenance costs, and then you can invest all that money you would have put towards a mortgage into other investments. Wait, so is buying a house better? Sam says typically yes, and here's why. Well, first, for the most part, since America began, homes have gone up in value. If you own the house, then you can house hack and rent out your bedrooms to your friends. And lastly, buying a home on a 30-year fixed interest rate is a great hedge against inflation.
Oh. That guy looks a lot like his dad. It's pretty crazy. For the most part, I thought it was right. There are definitely things to like about being a renter. As a renter, having a landlord to call is a huge upside. The one thing I'd probably take maybe a little issue with is like you have the flexibility to move all the time as a renter, which is true. But if you're in a house, especially in a house right now, and you decide to move, I mean, homes are in such high demand that you're going to sell. Assuming home prices go up, you might still break even or do really well even if you move after a year. So that's the only thing I'd mention there. But there's a risk there, and I think otherwise that was a really good description of renting versus buying. Well, in summary, there's a lot of great information, a lot of bad information on TikTok. Don't believe everything that you hear, but if you find anything on TikTok that you might have a question about, send it my way at homeownership@biltrewards.com, and maybe we'll do this all over again.